Hello and welcome to part 2 of the blog post series on master data management with electronic reporting. So in the first part we had a look at a specific setup, and let me quickly go through that. So we started with Dynamics 365 finance environment, where we said, okay, this is the DF10 environment and we set up our master data here. Then we have another instance and environment, DF9, and then we have Dataverse here. And we said, okay, whenever a new record is created or updated, we export this to a temporary file, for example, a SharePoint, and from there we import things to these two environments. And to avoid that the childs mess up with the master data, we do not allow them to change the master data, but we say, okay, you have to request a change by means of a Power App, for example, and then the master data manager can decide whether he accepts or rejects the change. And if this is accepted, then we go through the export loop and the changes are pushed out to all of the environments, so that all of these companies or databases have the same data. Now let's have a look at the setup, how I configured the whole thing. And what we will investigate first is this export job, where we take the master data from the DF10 and export it by means of electronic reporting. And the first thing that I tried is I tried to enter two separate lines in the electronic reporting destination. But while doing that, I noticed that this is not working. At least in my environment, it did not work. I only got data for the first element in the first SharePoint document library. So then I thought, okay, hey, instead of making one export, let's create a copy of the Excel export file and then do two exports. I also tried that. So I have here two electronic reporting output destinations. I will get two files into SharePoints, but I noticed, hey, sometimes when the first export job is still running and not completed, and the second one starts already running, then sometimes I missed some data. So I don't know if this is specific to my environment or whether you also saw this, but what I noticed is that there should be a time gap in between those two jobs when they are executed. Otherwise, sometimes records were missing in my case. So I thought, okay, I don't have many records. I can put a 30-second time gap in between. But the problem is, you don't know if you need 30 seconds or 60 seconds or maybe more, or maybe less. So I thought, hey, that's pretty risky because I cannot be sure that my master data from this environment are fully exported to all of the others. So I said, okay, that's not something that I want to use. So what did I use instead? I said, okay, export my master data and put it in a SharePoint document library. From there, you import this file in DF9 and you port it to another SharePoint document library, an archive. And from this archive, then you feed Dataverse. And then once that's imported, you put this file in the archive. This works fine, but it has a disadvantage, and the disadvantage that there's a time gap. So there's a time gap from the creation of the master record until it arrives here. And then once the record is here until it arrives in Dataverse, there's another time gap. So it's not a perfect solution, but maybe something that you can use and maybe twist a bit for your purposes. Okay, and then another question that came to my mind is, hey, how can I avoid that all customer records that I ever created or ever modified, that they are included in this export job? I do not want to export millions of customers or thousands of customers that have been changed in the last couple of days. So what I did is I sort about a filter. Only export those that have been modified within the last 15 minutes. Why 15 minutes? Well, I said, okay, an export takes 5 minutes. And then to be 100% sure that a modified record is really wrapped up there, I multiply this by 3. That's the reason why I did it this way. And then the question is, how can you realize that? And well, I put some additional fields in the electronic report end. Let's have a look at that. That's my data model. These are the fields that I want to export. And here the ones that are highlighted in pink color, these are the additional fields that I use to filter records that have been created or modified within the last 15 minutes. And here are the formulas. So I used the cast table to export the records, and then I added a couple of calculated fields. The first one looks at the current system time and is creating a text string. And in the second step, I'm taking this text string and convert it to a value. But the question is, how do you calculate the value? Well, I just take the seconds multiplied by 1, the minutes times 60, the hours times 3600, and so on. And then I get a value. And this value can then be compared with the modified date time string that I convert also in a value. So I really can get the time difference between the system time and the modified date time of a data record. And then I say, okay. Then I filter the cast table for those records that have been created within the last 15 minutes. And this element is then bound to the record list. That's the trick. Okay, and then the question is, of course, hey, what does this mean for a normal export? And here I have a similar table to what I used in the first post. Here on the left you see the time, and the batch jobs are running every 5 minutes in this case. So if here 8:05, 8:10, 8:15, and so on. And in this example, I create a customer at 8:01. This customer will be included in the export job in DF10 at 8:05. But in this export job, I consider every record that has been created or modified within this time frame. And because that's included in the export job, it will be imported here. Here's just the description. Then I create another customer at 8:06. This will be included in the export job at 8:10. And in this export job, I have customer 1 and customer 2 included. Why? Because the time range that I specified looks for customers that have been created or modified in this time frame. What happens then in the other environments? Well, they import the new customer, C2, and update the previous one. And if there's nothing to update, nothing's going to happen. And that's what happens if you create a third customer. We export then all 3 of them because they were created within this time range. And then on the other side, 2 records will be updated, C1 and C2, and C3 will be created. So that's the principle of this whole configuration. And so on. Okay, but now let us have a look at the demo and how I configure this. Okay, so we are now in the DF10 environment. You can also see that from the URL that I used. And similar to what I showed you, in the slides, the DF10 environment is in green color. DF9 will be in blue color. And later we have a customer engagement that's kind of dark blue or black. And now the idea is we start in DF10, so in this environment, and create a customer. And maybe let's do that at the beginning, because the export jobs will take a while. As you know, it runs only every couple of minutes. And you see that I tested this a couple of times. So the next customer that we want to create is 4738. So let's create a customer. We call it DE 4738. We call it 28 sales hub. Then I say the customer group is 10 and the country is Germany. And maybe let's say the city is Würzburg. Okay. And of course we also want to have a street, let's say Frankfurter Straße 1. Okay, so these are the minimum fields that I need to create this record. And then the idea is of course that this customer shows up in a couple of minutes here. So if we filter here for the customers that start with 3, that it will show up here and also here. But to realize that, let's have first a look at the electronic report in DF10. So if I start again from electronic reporting workspace so that you know where I started, then we have a simple export. So here I have this one, MDM customer master. I said okay. I create a model with a couple of fields. So here are a couple of fields, and these are the fields that I used for separating or identifying the ones that have been modified in the last couple of minutes. Then let's go one step back. Here's the model mapping. There's also nothing really special here. The direction is to model. That's something you have to look out for. And in the designer, I have here the cast table. On top I have the calculated fields. So you can see all of the formulas here. And based on the calculated time date difference, I have here this filter that is then mapped here with this record list. So basically my Excel file that I use for the output will include only those fields from records that have been modified in the last 15 minutes. And then I have here this Excel table. So if I click on the designer, then this is similar to what you saw in my previous post, just include these things. I have a test field here. This was just for testing purposes because I want to show or calculate the time in seconds. But this was just for testing, so that's not critical for anything, just for me to control. And then of course, in electronic reporting, you have to define the destination. And here I said, okay, this is my destination. In the setting, it goes to this SharePoint document library. So if we are going to SharePoint, it's my SharePoint site. That's this document library where the export file will be placed into. Okay, then let's have a look at the other companies. So now let's go to DF9. Let's see if the export already happened. Probably not. Oh, it's already there. Okay. So you see that's what has been imported from DF10 company. You notice that the customer group is here 90, while I entered a different one in DF10, and that's because I hard coded it in the import. I will show you that in a minute. And the reason was, well, I was just too lazy to include all of the important fields into my export file. Otherwise I would have 20-30 fields that I could export, and I said, hey, for this demonstration, a couple of fields are sufficient. And if I do not have this, then I'm just hard coding it. And then let's have a look at this one, if it also arrived here already. No, not yet. Then we have to wait for the import job. And while waiting, we can go back to the DF9 company and have a look at the configuration of the electronic reporting import. So if we go to electronic reporting here, then I have a couple more here. So that's the one that I use for importing. Then in the designer, I have here a couple of fields, the ones that I want to import. And the important thing here is the model mapping. Because in the model mapping, you have to define two destinations. That's important. And in the designer, we have our data source here in the middle. This will be filled by Excel, by the Excel file that we import. And here on the right hand side, you see customer V3 entity. And what I'm doing here is simply map these fields with the respective fields here in the data model. So let's have a look. So city, for example, country, region, and then here you see, for example, the customer group where I just entered 90. And of course, this is something that you can easily improve. And that's the Excel import. I will not dig into that because I have shown this a couple of times in previous posts. And there's nothing special actually here. But what is important is that you define the electronic reporting source. So if you come here, then we say, okay, we take these files that are coming from this SharePoint document library, and once we imported it, we move it to this SharePoint document library. So if we go back to SharePoint, then we take the file from here, and once it's imported, we put it here. Okay, so that's the import job for this blue environment, so to say, for DF9. And then let's have a look at the customer engagement configuration and see if the record already created. So you see the record is here. And then the question is, hey, how did you get that imported? And before we dig into that, I want to make a modification of this customer and say, okay, here in the name, I missed the customer letters. So I want to go back to DF10, change it, and then explain you how this import works. So let's go to the green environment. So that's my customer. And I say, that's the customer. I make a name change, I change group, it doesn't actually matter what you change. The important thing is that there's an update on this record so that a new date time stamp is created that will be grabbed up by the export job. And then of course this change should come to the blue environment. So let's see. It should show up here in a minute or a couple of minutes, and then it show up here. But the important question is, hey, how did you get the record automatically in here? And the solution to that is RCS. If you have seen my blog post on the text service, then we use the same principles. We have here a separate environment, regulatory configuration service, and here we have electronic reporting. Same kind of setup and configuration that we need. And you see here, that's the import, that's a data model, that's a model mapping, that's the Excel. The setup is exactly the same as in DF9. The only difference is if we go into the designer, then again we have here two destinations, and in the designer the destination is different. So let me try to show you that. So here you see Dataverse accounts. So if I click on destination and edit, then you will see that we have actually here the entity from Dataverse. And we do an insert or update. So that's why I expected the name changes. And then of course, here we have the same, from our fields that we fill with Excel, we map the data. Some of the fields cannot be automatically filled. For example, the account ID that's something that you will not see directly in the UI unless you modify it, but it's a mandatory field. And what did I do here? Well, the account ID is a GUID, and I said, okay, in electronic reporting, I can create a GUID value with this formula, and then, well, I choose basically random numbers, and I included here my account number. So I said, okay, in this GUID, I want to see my account number so that I can follow up if needed to which this is related. And then the other fields, account number, address, and so on, they are all linked with these fields here. Okay, so that's the setup of this. But let's go back a step, because there is one important element, and that's this one here. So here on the right hand side you see the connected application, and this basically makes the connection to Dataverse. But the question is, how did I configure that? Well, if we go back to electronic reporting here, then there is here a connected application. And here you see the different environments that I have connected. And the key is, of course, this one here, because I want to import data here. I do not want to import something else. This is something I needed for testing something, but this is the key here, because we want to update a record. And then, of course, the other thing, you need in electronic reporting a source. And the source, oh, I did not, wait a minute, maybe I clicked the wrong one, because there are a little bit different settings here. Should be this one, or it must be in another one. I have configured that. Let's see if I can see the settings here. I don't know why they are not showing up here, but for my batch job I set it up and said, okay, the source is this one here. So take the file from this SharePoint document library and move it into this. This is what I configured. And based on that, it then creates or updates these records every couple of minutes. So let's see if the customer name has been put in here. No, not yet. So maybe the second change that we made is not completely pulled through. So we have made the change here in the green environment. Oh, here where we change the customer. The next change should happen here. So let's see if this happened already, or whether we have to wait. Yeah, seems we have to wait a bit. And then, of course, this second change will also happen here. Yeah, but I do not want to wait for that, because it will just take too long for this post, and it will be boring just clicking on the refresh button. So rather than that, let us go back to my PowerPoint for some important remarks that show you how to configure these import and export jobs, and let's make a short summary. Okay, so here some notes on the setup of DF9, and what I set up here for the import of the master data records is basically similar to what I showed you in previous blog posts. So if you do not know, check out my posts on electronic reporting before. The setup is simple, so you have 3 elements: model mapping, and this Excel file. That's the first part, that's the model. Then I have here the model mapping to destination. That's something you should not overlook. And then you map the fields, in my case, to the customer V3 entity. And then the Excel configuration maps just the different fields. So nothing special really here. Of course, here we have the electronic reporting source, where we grab the data that were exported from DF10 and put them in an archive, which will then be the source for the customer engagement environment. The demo I already showed you, so let's go to the setup in Dataverse. And here we have a similar setup as in DF9. The main difference is here this connected application. where I have here the different environments. Also, I showed you this configuration already. Okay, as a summary, so what did we see? So the electronic reporting export import job for master data management is certainly not a perfect master data management solution. There are many things that you can improve, and actually I did not show you the Power App that I mentioned in the beginning. Well, just because I left this as a task for you, and that's pretty easy, because you just have to grab a record and then make a suggestion for a change and then update a record in the DF10 environment. That's pretty easy, and everybody who listens here can do that, can certainly do that. What I want to emphasize here is that this, what I said as a not perfect master data management solution, is because there is no instant synchronization. So first we create a record or update a record in DF10, then in a second environment, and then in Dataverse. So that can take a while, and even if you put the batch job execution time to 1 minute, it might take 2 or 3 minutes until you see the record everywhere. So if you have a business process that requires instant customer master data synchronization, then this is not the solution for you. The other thing is, if you update a record, so we updated the name and added a couple of letters, but if you even change something that we do not include in the export, so let's say a financial dimension, that's something we did not include in our export, even then an update will occur and this record will be exported. Why? Because we did not apply a specific filter for fields that need to be updated to determine the export. We just said, okay, whenever a record is updated, export it and then import it or update it in the other systems. But even though I would say that this is a very nice out-of-the-box master data management tool that can integrate with many internal and external systems. So you can do, if you watch my previous blog post, you can really do many things with electronic reporting. Not only sharing master data, you can create documents, you can fill journals, you can summarize, calculate things, and put it between your systems. And all of that without extra cost and no coding. Of course, there are 1,000 things that you can improve. You can change the execution time. You can add additional fields. You can use other systems to trigger this. So, for example, if I say SAP is my master, and where I just put a file here, and this can be any kind of file, I put it to SharePoint and then use electronic reporting to feed DF10, DF9, and Dataverse, then this is not a problem, because electronic reporting can do the mapping. You can extract fields from any text file, from XML files, from whatever you have, and then do the master data synchronization here. Or you can do the same if you start with Dataverse. So it doesn't really matter. And maybe this post gave you an idea what alternatives you have compared to, let's say, for example, Power Automate, that you could use as an alternative or do it right. And I believe that electronic reporting can be a good alternative for special cases, especially if you have some mapping, some conversions to do, some calculations to do. Maybe not, this might not be the best for customer master data, but this post was only to show you or give an introduction into the possibilities and give you an idea how you can extend and look a bit beyond your table or what you usually work with, maybe to find an alternative or good replacement solution. So this brings me to the end of this post. So thanks a lot for watching and listening. As usual, if you have comments, put them in the comment section or send me an email to this email address here. So thank you and looking forward to seeing you in the next blog post then. Okay, at the end, I just owe you the update of the customer records. So if you remember from the example, this record was created in DF10. Now we are in the blue environment, DF9. And if everything worked, then we should see an update in the customer name. You see now it ends with customer. So an update was executed here, and if things worked also here, then we should see also an update here. So yeah, also here you see that you can not only import but also update records with electronic reporting. Okay, but that's it for today. Thanks.